Welcome to Cryptocurrencies, the Rise of Digital Money show. Last week I was a guest on Lark's signature program, which is a must for crypto investors, and I'm thrilled to be recording an interview where I get to ask Lark many of the most important questions of the moment. So, Lark, first of all, thank you for being here.
Pleasure as always to chat with you, Lior.
Hey, you know what? We're a long way from 20,000 Bitcoin. In previous bear markets for Bitcoin, when it dropped 70 to 90%, could you talk about what drove the change, the turnaround, what made it finally bottom, and most importantly, how can people find out catalysts or indicators that this is over, that the carnage is over, and that we're looking at a turnaround?
Sure, absolutely. Well, let me, go to the first part of the question. There is, what happened? We've seen Bitcoin five times now have 75% or greater retractions, and this is nothing new for Bitcoin. What we saw back in December, January was a massive bubble of money flooding in as there was a lot of hype in the markets. I mean, the South Koreans were going crazy for it. Regular retail investors were just going nuts for Bitcoin. We saw a lot of money coming in from ICOs as well, which was flowing all around the markets. And as 2018's kind of progressed, we've seen a lot of that ICO promise turn out to be not much more than hype, unfortunately. And so that has really hurt the markets as these ICOs have been selling off millions and millions of dollars of cryptocurrencies at any price, basically. In fact, in the last couple months, we've seen a lot of ICOs selling off Ethereum well below what they raised it at. So this is hurting the markets, that constant downward pressure of panicking teams, because you have to think just because you're launching an ICO doesn't mean that you're somehow fiscally responsible or a financial genius. And so they've been putting a lot of pressure in terms of the sell side on. Now, flip it around, and what are we looking for next? We're definitely reaching that stage now with Bitcoin where we are feeling our feet around for the bottom. Is this it? I mean, there has been some movements recently that make people think, well, we might be going even lower than this, but if we do go lower than this, it's not going to be substantially lower. I don't think we're going to see, like the sub $1,000 Bitcoin or something like that. I would be blown away. And if that does happen, well, I don't know. I'm going to sell everything I have and buy Bitcoin. But more importantly, we've seen so many things happening recently that are really providing an indicator for where this industry is going. Things like more and more people are being hired for blockchain-based jobs. We have massive investment from the biggest players in Wall Street. You have the guys from ICE, who of course have the New York Stock Exchange, and his wife launching Backed. I mean, these are people who could do anything, absolutely anything with their time, energy, and money. And what they are choosing to do with their time, energy, and money is to get into Bitcoin. And that says so much to me about where this industry is heading in terms of price valuation. It's going to be massive. It's just a question of building that back up, actually getting the institutional investors involved in a way where they feel comfortable to be involved, and then getting retail investors who have been burnt so badly invited back into the fold. And that's perhaps a trickier equation than getting the institutional investors back in.
So, and that's a good point. I was just on a G4 Crypto Summit panel with Tom Vase, which you can check out on David Modell's Looking at the Markets YouTube channel. Tone was there, and he was talking about a downside target of below 2,000 at the worst case. He was talking about 2,800, but at the very low case, below 2,000 even, because he says the bounce has been very weak, and so the bulls haven't been taken out completely yet, or the weak hands, I should say, haven't been taken out completely yet. So he thinks this might be a fake out that we've seen in the last few days, and that we're headed down short term until this really cleans out. What is your personal strategy in light of what's going on right now? How are you trading? And I know that you also are not only trading Bitcoin, so can you talk about some of the other projects you're just looking at right now, and what's interesting to you?
For sure. I mean, I'm quite long on Bitcoin, so I'm dollar cost averaging in on regular intervals with Bitcoin and a couple other of the top cryptocurrencies. I see them as having amazing long-term potential. So the day-to-day price action doesn't worry me so much because I'm regularly putting in small amounts. But in terms of what's going to happen over the next couple of weeks, I think there's a lot of variables coming into play that could easily see the price going down before we get to the end of January and backed launches, for example, before we get into, I think it's February. Is it NASDAQ launching in February? Might be. Don't quote me on that. But there's so much that's going to be happening at the start of next year. So if we do see any more downward price momentum, it is going to come back up, and it might come up back up a lot quicker than people think. But in terms of other projects I've been looking at recently, I've been dollar cost averaging a lot into Cardano and into Stellar Lumens. Both of those platforms I see as being incredibly promising. The tech behind them, very interesting. What they're trying to do. So I've been putting into those projects more. But in terms of making money in a bear market, this is what a lot of people look at and talk about and think about. And there's so much opportunity. There's so much opportunity, Lior. This is the crazy thing. I mean, if you're trading smart, right? If you're investing in things, and use your stop losses, right? If you're trading, have your strategies in mind here, because even when we see these days of big dumps, well, there are still certain coins that are doing very well, that are gaining 5% in a day, or 10% in a day, or 50% in a day, like, as we know, some cryptocurrencies can do. So there's still plenty of room to be playing the game here in terms of trading. And a lot of the classical indicators do play out on a lot of these coins. I mean, it's tough because we're in such a period of volatility right now to always rely on some of the indicators, but at the same time, the potential is absolutely massive in these times of great volatility. Great volatility can equal great loss, or it can equal great profit if you're using the right tools to play the game.
Sure, I think also very important, and I've heard no one talking about this, so I'll throw it out there for the first time on a public platform. I think what can happen eventually, not with Bitcoin, but with other projects that are more centralized, that have a development team, a management team, and it's easier to talk with the stakeholders. You could see a situation where legitimate blockchain focused companies, IBM, Intel, Accenture, and Qualcomm, Oracle, the big tech companies, Microsoft, approaching stakeholders and looking to buy the entire platform, the entire technology, and that could really spark a bull market. An acquisition spree from big tech into the space where they issue a public offering on any number of projects that are not competing with Bitcoin, that are not oriented to be currencies, but more tokens that have other features. That could be something that can really change how people look at this. But obviously, and this plays into my next question here, Lark, what is the holdup in regulating this sector? Why is it so complicated for governments to say, okay, this is how we want it regulated, let's go? Because obviously the free markets work here. People are buying and selling every day. Exchanges are open 24/7, and it just seems like a no-brainer to make this happen. What's the holdup? Why do you think this is so complicated?
Well, two things. I want to just make one quick comment about IBM. Actually, this is one of the reasons why I'm continually buying into Stellar Lumens, because IBM has actually come out and said this is our go-to public blockchain, essentially, and that's what they've said about Stellar Lumens. So that's very interesting note about one of the reasons why I like Stellar. But to answer the second question in terms of regulations and regulators, I find that quite often the people in charge of regulating things don't really know that much about it. And that is a massive problem, because politicians are often unable to look past the next election. And look, the corruption is very real when it comes to politics and politicians. And so when we see slow regulation happening, well, where are we seeing fast regulation? And I think that's what tells us a lot about where the regulatory ship is heading, because we see what's happening in Malta, in Australia, in Japan, in Liechtenstein, and all these different places. They're seeing the opportunity and trying to react to that, to try and capture that opportunity. In Japan, for example, perhaps regulators understand technology a little bit better. They've been at the forefront of having to regulate for technology for quite a while. But the U.S., as an example, we've got so much corruption in the U.S. government. So, and a lot of politicians who just don't understand these things. I've listened to the hearings. I've listened to them talking to representatives from the industry, and you can just tell that they're totally out of their depth when it comes to this stuff. So that is definitely part of the problem in regulating it. And so then it comes off to the SEC, for example, to have to regulate and to try and do test cases and see how much they can push the barrier, see how much they can enforce what they think they need to be enforcing, but they're just playing by the rules that are given to them, not necessarily trying to make new rules yet again. And so they're trying to enforce, well, if it looks like a security, it smells like a security, then it's probably a security versus, well, let's try and play around with the definition of this. How are we going to adapt to these 24-hour markets? And regulators are having a hard time with it. And especially big economies where there's so much at stake from major stakeholders.
So let me ask you, do you see a correlation between cryptocurrencies and how they trade and other asset classes? Is there anything to be found yet between how stocks trade or bonds or cash or any currency, gold, silver, etc., and cryptocurrencies? Obviously, there's an enormous correlation between how Bitcoin trades and the other cryptocurrencies, but between the cryptos and something that is not a cryptocurrency, do you see any large correlation? The reason I'm asking this question is because in 2017 we saw the S&P 500, the Dow, and the Nasdaq going up every single month consecutively for 12 months, something that has never happened before. But we didn't see a bubble in stocks. We didn't see the euphoria. The euphoria was with cryptocurrencies, and so many analysts in our group, my partners and I, were thinking, was this the euphoric top for the stock market? But essentially, instead of people speculating in Nasdaq companies, they speculated in cryptocurrencies, and now we're in a bear market for both, basically, or entering a bear market for both, with cryptocurrencies leading the way. Do you see any correlation, or is this still a standalone entity, and therefore it's very good if you want to diversify into them and you have no exposure at all right now?
I think there's definitely correlation, and what's happened recently has proven that there's a strong correlation here. And it really comes down to, yes, there are some retail investors who are not invested in stocks, will never invest in stocks, will never look at those more traditional asset classes, and only invested in crypto. And there are plenty of stock investors who will never venture into crypto. And, it goes right around the barrel there. Now, the correlation, though, is there. When the economy is doing good, the economy is doing good, people have more money to spend, and they're spending it on more speculative assets like cryptocurrencies. I personally would love to see the whole crypto market break away from the traditional markets, but that hasn't happened yet. And in fact, what we're seeing now is all these calls for Bitcoin ETF and things. That's actually to make crypto more adaptable and more susceptible to the overall trends of the traditional markets. And so that is definitely something to keep in mind when it comes to the uncoupling of these industries. The one thing, though, that I think could really spur the whole crypto economy becoming its own strong, powerful entity is going to be the security token industry. Because when the money starts flowing in from that, when we essentially take what's been happening on, the 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, take off a day of the stock exchanges when a president dies or something, old school kind of investing to a 24/7 highly liquid market, it's really going to change things. And the money of that is going to be cryptocurrency, whether it be Bitcoin or Ethereum or some of the other players that are coming up that are going to have security token offerings. This is going to be the money of the internet and the money of the future. And there will be a point where those industries decouple and the crypto economy finds its own power and strength. But it's so far away from that right now. You look at the daily volume of, the New York Stock Exchange, for example, and it just dwarfs so massively the entire crypto industry right now. So we're still susceptible to those overall trends in the macroeconomics in terms of where the economy is going. And even once the industry does decouple in the future from the direct effects of the stock markets, for example, doesn't mean it won't be unbeholden to the wider economy.
Lark, in closing, can you tell people where they can follow more of your work?
Oh, for sure. Come and join me over on YouTube. That's the best place. I try to get around to some of the decentralized media platforms too, like Steemit. But come over to YouTube. That's the best place to get in contact with me or check out the videos and see what's up with the news. Maybe get a bit of comedy and a few laughs while you're at it.
Hey, thanks for being here today.
Pleasure as always.